audible and am I audible?
Yes, madam. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. So my talk will be on understanding the transcranial direct current stimulation. So uh, when we talk about the brain stimulation techniques, we often think that it is the product of a modern neuroscience. But actually, the fact is quite contrary to this fact. The use of electricity has predated the modern medicines by centuries. So let's understand this. So the first image depicts the torpedo fish or electric ray. So there is a story, interesting it is. There was a man who had a gout in his great toe and he was very much distressed with the pain. I'm talking about the centuries back, right? So he was so much distressed that I think probably he was depressed and had a lot of pain. So he went to near to the seashore and he was standing there. So suddenly he felt a shock like sensation. What happened? The torpedo fish bit him in the great toe. What did he felt? After 30 minutes, he felt that so much of pain which he was suffering from the ears suddenly vanished. So this finding was actually observed by scientist Scribonius Largus at that time, and subsequently they started using live fish for the treatment of headaches, pains, etc. So fast forward to the 18th century, the Alessandro Volta, he actually made a portable battery kind of thing which provided the regulated electricity. Fortunately, because of him, we don't have to shock our brains with the live fish now. After that, scientist Giovanni Aldini, he was the actually first person who used the electricity for the treatment of the psychiatric illnesses. So in this picture, you can see that he is stimulating himself with that voltaic pile. He was actually a researcher and scientist in the prison at that point of time in the 18th century I'm talking about. Although his experiments were very controversial and seemed crude, but he was the pioneer in treating the depression or the patients of melancholia. At that time, it was depression used to call melancholia. So he actually treated those patients. Now, fast forward to the 2000th century. Now we have the everything, the big voltaic pile, and the thing which we have to shock our brains with the life is the now we have the portable, sleek, compact machine called TDCS, which actually is based upon the previous principles only. The only difference is that it is quite portable, it is very easy to use, and but it works in the same principle. So here we have reached after like with the centuries, right? So before addressing about the TDS, I just want to show the TDCS machine because maybe some people have not seen it and might think it would have been unseen elephant. So just want to show this picture. It's just a machine with a small portable battery and it has two electrodes. It gives current through this simple battery and we tie it around the head like this as shown in the picture. So now coming to the main talk, what is TDCS? That is transcranial direct current stimulation. So it is a non-invasive technique. It means it stimulates the brain or inhibits the brain, basically changes the neuronal excitability, whatever, without breaching the skin or without needing the need of surgery, right? So it is one of the non-invasive technique. Secondly, it is based upon the application of electric current, that is a direct current which is uninterrupted, flows from cathode to anode in one direction. What does it mean? It means the polarity in the electrode remains fixed. The current will always flow from one direction to the another. So one electrode will always be anode, other electrode would always be the cathode. Secondly, the important catch in this thing is it gives or it works through a very tiny amount of current, that is around 1 to 3 milliamps. While in ECT, almost average, we gave around 800 milliamps current. And so this is the basic difference. The amount of electric current which both these modality provides is quite different. Secondly, ECT produces the action potential in the neurons that thereby it leads to the production of seizures, convulsion. But here, the TDCS, the current which it produces, it actually just shifts the resting membrane potential of the neuron either towards the depolarization or either towards the hyperpolarization, but it itself will not cause the action potential. So now you will ask, what is the benefit of that? The benefit of that is because when action potential is produced, the neurons will fire and will produce convulsions, right? But if we are just shifting the resting membrane potential, so the seizures will not happen. So what uh, ECTA is little stigmatized for, it's the production of convulsion actually. So it basically bypasses that thing. It is stimulating but not producing convulsion, and simultaneously it is changing, causing some change in the neuronal excitability. Uh, and the best part is that the patient remains fully conscious. It is a OPD basis procedure. While in ECT, we have to anesthetize and we need a good setup and requirement of anesthesia is there, right? So now let's dive into the engine or how TDCS works into the brain. So what happens? Now I'll be talking about how current goes inside the brain. So when we switch on the stimulator, TDCS stimulator, the current will pass through the wire, then to the electrode, then the current will go to pass through the scalp or the skull, which provides a high resistance or impedance. Much of the current get lost in this process, but some amount of the current will breach this resistance and will ultimately reach to the CSF, which is actually a very high bioconductive material. Af- then after reaching to the CSF, this current or the electric field which has been produced there will now go to the gray matter of the brain, which we want, right? Now, look at the second picture. When the electric field would reach to the gray matter, in the form, there are gyri, right? There are folds. So neurons will be aligned in a different variation. The thing is that here is a catch, how electric field is going to actually stimulate the neurons, or which kind of neurons it is stimulating. So the neurons which are aligned parallel to the electric field will only get stimulated or inhibited through this electric field. The neurons which are lying perpendicular to this electric field will not have any effect of that electric field. So what is the inference of this? The inference is that everyone's brain has little different folding pattern. And when we are placing electrode over here, so we do not know how many number of neurons are actually being stimulated. It depends upon the anatomical variations of the person as well. So thereby it influences the variability in the treatment results of the people. Next, so this picture again shows that through the anode, the current goes inside the brain. It will, depolarize the neuron, and then this current will be collected with the help of cathode, and through this process, it will inhibit the other part of the brain that is which is underlying the cathode. This is the Gairai head model. In this, it shows that, see, what we do in TDCS, we place two electrodes. So we think that, okay, the area which is beneath the anode will get depolarized, and the area which is beneath the cathode will get hyperpolarized or inhibited. But only this much doesn't happen. The current will actually flow from anode to cathode. In this pathway, the whole brain region which is between these electrodes the current will actually wash away through the whole brain tissue. So the thing which we were discussing previously, that is very specific. No, it is not. What happens through the computational modeling, we understand that, okay, the amount of current or the amount of stimulation or inhibition which happens to the brain region underlying just beneath the cathode or anode is the is the part of the brain that gets maximally stimulated, but the region between that electrodes also gets a certain amount of current. So exactly we do not know, like for example, in depression, if I'm putting anode over left DLPFC, so it is the result of just stimulating left DLPFC what we are getting as an outcome, or is it some other networks are also being influenced with that current? So this is again the limitation of the mechanism of action. It is not fully explained, like exactly what. Okay, just give me a minute. There is a technical glitch. Okay, so here we are. Yeah. So I wanted to convey that the current doesn't travel in a straight line. Instead, it washes broadly across the entire head, diffusely affecting everything under and between the large sponges. Now, somebody might think, then how it is specific? It is specific in the way that the current the area beneath the electrode is the one which is maximally stimulated, but so thereby we say that it is little specific, but we are not very sure and specific, and this is the limitation of the conventional TDCS. Now, till now we talked about how current travels inside the brain. Now I would like to focus how exactly current leads to the outcome or the changes in the excitability. So here is a classical paper by Perpura et al. Which he wrote in 1965. So here you can see in these two graphs, when the anode was on, so the firing rate pattern has increased, right? The frequency has increased. While when the cathode was on, the firing rate disappeared, right? It decreased. So he said that whenever we, provide the electrical stimulus to the brain, and with the anode, it leads to the depolarization, and with the cathode, it leads to the hyperpolarization. Basically, if we go deep into that, the electric field changes the permeability of the ions. The anode the current through the anode will cause the increase in the permeability of the sodium ions, thereby leading to the depolarization. In the same way, when we place cathode, then it will, make the inside of the cell more negative. Then thereby it leads to the hyperpolarization. Similarly, in the second paper by Fritz et al. In 2010, he showed that in the experiment in the mice hippocampus, he showed that after the application of the TDCS here, the normalized peak amplitude became elevated, and even it stayed there for some good amount of time. That is, for 150 minutes, the normalized peak amplitude remained elevated. Through this, we infer that TDCS does something within the synapse, right? It increases or strengthens the connections there. It alters something in the synapse, which leads to the plasticity. Thereby, it increased the normalized peak amplitude. Second thing which they observed in this research, that it was dependent upon the BDNF secretion. When they blocked the BDNF secretion by giving some medicines to the mice, then they saw this effect disappeared. Thirdly, they also noted that the mice with a well genotype had significant greater synaptic potentiation than the one with a met genotype. So by this paper, we infer that TDCS basically does long-term potentiation in the brain. Basically, it alters the synaptic plasticity. Secondly, the effect of the TDCS might depend upon the genetic makeup of that patient. uh, Diving deeper into that molecular mechanism underlying the TDCS plastic effects. So whenever the anode will depolarize the neuron, the calcium will enter into the neuron in a bigger amount. it will ultimately release the magnesium blockade in the NMDA receptor, leading and more calcium will inflow into the neuron. AMPA receptors will get accumulated or will get active, and thereby it leads to the secretion of Crab protein, BDNF factors. So this was the actual demonstration or the research experiment he did in the animal model. So hereby it is again a proof that TDCS leads to the synaptic plasticity via the secretion of BDNF kind of factors. Uh, there are other mechanisms as well, which I will explain in brief. So in this experiment, the scientists noted that it doesn't only changes and it doesn't have the role only in the neuroplasticity. Even it alters the level of neurotransmitters inside the cell, which medication does. For example, when we apply anodal TDCS, it reduces the GABAergic secretion there, so thereby that area will get more excited, right? And thereby it will lead to the stimulation. Similarly, cathode will inhibit the glutamatergic transmission, and thereby it causes inhibition of that area. So basically, it plays with the GABA glutamate balance. Thereby, it is having role in epilepsy. Somebody was asking in the last presentation. Uh, Another mechanism of action. See that some people argue that we give only a tiny amount of current, how can it will modulate a big bundle of neurons in the brain? So here is the answer for that. See, each neuron, okay, this is fine that the current which goes inside the brain will stimulate only certain amount of neuron, but the neuron is not a single entity. It is connected to multiple of neurons. It is connected to multiple networks. So when one neuron's activity gets changed, then the chemical changes or the transmission of that activity happens or gets amplified to the whole network of that the network of the neuron population. So thereby the network effect or the amplification of the whole network activity, the TDCS shows its effect. As I mentioned previously, that just not the areas beneath the electrode, they not only get altered in their excitability, even the brain area between them also gets some amount of current, which have our glial cells, astrocytes, blood vessels. So now this is also under the research that there's a hypothesis that by computational modeling and the experiment, they have shown that even after the application of TDCS, the calcium activity inside the astrocyte cells also gets activated. And what does astrocytes do? For the actually long lasting synaptic plasticity, the astrocytes needs to get activated because they maintain the potassium balance, they maintain the calcium balance, and provide the the and does the vasodilation of the arteriole there and provide the cerebral blood flow. So there might be the role of astrocytes as well in the effect of TDCS. Right? Okay, so this was about the how TDCS works. Now coming into the main picture, where I can give, right? What are the indications? So it can be given in a variety of conditions, including psychiatric and neurological conditions. And even at the start, mainly neurologists were giving it mainly actually. After that, psychiatrists also started giving it for the variety of psychiatric disorder. So it has a good evidence base for the neurological disorders as well. For neurological disorders, even in our department, we have given TDCS for epilepsy, for the motor symptoms of Parkinsonism. Apart from that, it is used to enhance cognitive performance, learning, migraine, post-stroke rehabilitation condition in which it is widely studied. And when we talk about the psychiatric disorders, so the common disorders like major depression, schizophrenia, OCD, substance use, in these conditions, TDCS has some evidence, which I'll be discussing later, and it is also being explored in the other conditions like ADHD, anxiety disorders, and for the research into the etiology, and even for the child psychiatric illnesses like ADHD, autism, TDCS has been explored, but the evidence base till now it's not that great. So now, because now we are in the evidence, we talk about the evidence base of every treatment. We just don't give any kind of treatment without it's having good evidence. So let's talk about the evidence of TDCS in different psychiatric disorder. I'll be talking about this thing in a very brief way because the exact protocol and the parameters required to treat these illnesses would be discussed by Dr. Sujita sir in the next session. So, it is important thing to note that TDCS has not achieved level A efficacy, that is a definite efficacy for the treatment of any of the disorder. One thing we should note, because when we give some treatment to the patient, we should also not glamorize everything that it is the ideal or the best thing. We should also tell the practical possibilities or the practical effectiveness of that treatment. However, it has probable efficacy, that is the level B evidence in the treatment of major depression, in the treatment of addiction and craving of alcohol use disorder, and for the fibromyalgia. The later international guidelines, which are evidence-based, published by Fregni et al. In 2021, in this study, the level of evidence of TDCS increased to level A, right? Similarly, for OCD and Tourette syndrome, TDCS still has level C evidence, while for the auditory hallucinations of the schizophrenia, it has level B evidence. Similarly, for addiction, it still has level B evidence for the craving or preventing relapses for alcohol. Now, because as I told you that the details of the protocol, exact protocol, what to give will be discussed later. So I'll be discussing the next parts. See, every patient in which I give TDCS will not respond, right? So there are many factors upon which the response and the benefit by which TDCS will have depends upon many factors, right? Some things, some points I already discussed, and some things which more we can discuss are here. So, see, when we give TDCS, we have to set certain amount of current, whether I am giving 1 amps, 2 amps, how much milliampere current. So, for 2 milliampere, it is said that the response of the current over the excitability of the neurons is linear. But beyond 2 or 3 amperes, we do not know. The research doesn't say that beyond 3 milliampere anode will always depolarize, cathode will always hyperpolarize. So the amount of current you are giving is also a deciding factor. Secondly, the placement of electrodes, which brain region you are targeting. For example, if in OCD there are many brain regions which are targeted, for example supplementary motor area, DLPFC, etc. So the effect will also be determined by the fact that where you are placing the electrode. Third thing is the size of electrode also matters, because the conventional TDCS has 5 into 7 centimeter square electrode, which is little broader, which is comparatively broader, I would say. So the effect or the current it would produce will not be just specific or precise, it will be little diffuse. So it will also determine the treatment effect. As I already mentioned, the gyri folding patterns, each one's head circumference is a little different, and the genetic makeup, these all determine the result. Fourthly, it is said that because TDCS just hyperpolarize or depolarize the neurons, it is actually not producing the action potential. So the neuron which is totally in resting state, the person is not doing anything. So in that state, just nudging the resting membrane potential may not produce the result. So if that neuron is little active, even by doing some task-based activities or doing something, so because the neuron is little active, and in that time, if we give TDCS, there are better chances that it will nudge the resting membrane potential in a better way, right? So it also depends upon the brain state of the condition, whether the patient is actively engaging or not. right? And apart from that, pharmacological medications also interferes. It is said that GABAergic medications, anti-epileptic medications have basically they decreases the cortical excitability. So it will also be a determining factor in you know having the output of the patient. So because we do not we that is why when we give TDCS to the patient, we try reducing the dose of benzodiazepines, etc. Right? So there's now, because till now we talked about the fact how it works, where we can give, what is the evidence base, but it is very important and ethical to know where it should not be given and where it would produce problems. So there are four absolute contraindications for that. If the person has some surgery and has some implant in the brain, has some compromised skin at the electrode site, there's a breach of the skin there, or having some facial metals and tattoos, because some tattoos also contains a metal containing dyes. That's why they are the absolute contraindication. First, let's understand why. Because see, in this picture, there's a plate in his head. So what happens? The current will always flow through the path of least resistance, and which the metal will provide this. So the what happens? The whole current which is going from anode to cathode now will go through this plate, and the localized heating burns can happen, and it can distort the effect of the current which we want to give. That is, and we do not know, and we can't predict exactly what will happen with that electric current and plate, right? But it will definitely increase the chances of burning or problems there. And even if the brain is injured, for example, patient having some gliosis after certain thing, so even in that compromised brain, how the current will travel, we are not sure. So that is why these are the conditions in which we have to be a little cautious. They are contraindicated, but in the recent studies, with the help of computational modeling, it has been shown that if the plate inside the brain consists of ferromagnetic substances like titanium, it has little less propensity for deflecting the electric field or causing the problem. So in some case report, they have given TDCS in those patients as well who have implanted plates, etc., in the brain, but with the proper caution, right? With the proper caution is that they recommend that electrode should be placed far away from that area, as far as away from that area. Secondly, if the some imaging is available for that, we can locate exactly where is the problem, so that we are not touching that part. It should be done. However, this is the still in research. So for general settings, I would recommend these things should be taken as absolute contraindication. The safety regarding these is emerging, but it's still debatable. Okay. Now, uh, regarding the safety of TDCS, the Bixen et al., who has worked immensely upon the TDCS, he has reported that any protocol with less than 40 minutes duration and less than 4 milliamps intensity hasn't produced any reports of serious adverse effect or irreversible injury till now. And his conclusion was based upon 33,200 sessions and upon 1,000 subjects. Right. So, generally, TDCS carries a tag of being having the safest side effect margin. It is the actually safest technique with have, and the most of the side effects which we get after TDCS are generally falls from the mild category. But yes, the main thing which we are worried, like production of seizures when we give RTMS, doesn't happen with it because it does not produce action potential. But again, we should be cautious in giving TDCS with thinking or applying every checklist before giving TDCS to the epilepsy patient. Secondly, it has a potential for the manic switch. In one case report, after the application of TDCS, the patient who had depression had the manic switch. So that history regarding the psychiatric illnesses should be asked. mostly the side effects which we get after the application of TDCS are headache, scalp pain, little burning sensation kind of thing. Some people report visual phosphenes kind of thing, because earlier we used to place one electrode over the supraorbital ridge. So here, because the optic nerve or retina gets stimulated, that is why phosphenes occurs. So these are some of the side effects. Before starting the TDCS procedure, you should adequately understand that is there a need to give TDCS for this particular patient? Is this patient's diagnosis suffice the indication of TDCS? Secondly, you should understand the contraindication. You should take some history regarding the contraindications of the TDCS. Thirdly, you should explain the procedure to the patient. Fourthly, you should tell the patient in advance the probable side effects, which falls into the milder category, but it is a good practice to always apply the side effect checklist after each session. And if the patient encounters some of these, then there are techniques by which we can overcome those side effects. If patient just reports the headache kind of thing, we can just give analgesics for a few sessions. In generally, it goes after 2-3 sessions, the patient gets adapted to this thing. Or if the patient reports any burning sensation, intense pain, then we have to check for the impedance. We can check for the site. We can check whether adequate saline is there or not in the response. So there are many things which by which we can allay the side effects of TDCS if at all it happens. But in general, I want to inculcate this thing in your mind that generally it has lesser side effects, but it doesn't mean that it is free of side effects. So when we encounter patients in a clinical population, we do get child population and pregnant females as well. So for those, for the current evidence says that this TDCS, actually the studies of the application of TDCS in pregnancies are sparse, but with the available literature that was published in 2018, which consisted of 13 studies dealing with the TDCS for depression in pregnancy, they reported that it can be given safely. There were no side effects in those pregnant females. And this is again the systematic literature review and of the 3 case reports only, in which 33 women were recruited and they reported no serious side effects, and even the results of TDCS application were encouraging. See how this is important for us to know, because in pregnancy we know that of 2-3% risk is always there with any of the medication. They have the potential to cause teratogenicity, but we want something which has less chance to cause teratogenicity. We are interested in that, and even the female is interested in that. So because the effect of TDCS is localized in her head, so practically the distance between the fetus and the scalp is a lot. For having an electric field to having some chance of stimulation in the uterus, they are quite minimal. So practically there are no chance of teratogenicity. But yes, because evidence is required, and till now only some of the only minimal evidence is there which says that it is safe. So definitely we can try with proper informed consent. For the child and adolescent group, Bixen et al. Reported that after 2800 session in the child, which he applied for 500 child and population, he reported no serious adverse event. But he also told the limitation of that. That his observation were based only upon a very less population. So it cannot be generalized. Overall, the safety evidence appears to be quite strong in this population as well. And even in our department, many of the thesis has happened in the child adolescent group with the TDCS. So generally, we haven't encountered any side effect apart from mild pain, headache. So clinically, till now, our experience says it is safe, but the evidence is still emerging. Limitations with the conventional TDCS. As I mentioned, that the current is actually washing the brain area between those two electrodes, right? And we do not because we do not want other network or other brain area to get stimulated or inhibit. We want to be more specific. So what this is the problem with the conventional TDS. So there is an answer for that. Now the advanced, technically advanced version of the TDCS, that is the high definition TDCS, has come into the picture. So what it does, it has a very small electrode which is around 12 size as compared to the electrodes which are as compared to the electrodes of the conventional TDCS, which were of 5 to 7 centimeters square. So because the size of the electrode is very small, and in this, okay, I'll show the picture as well. The in which red the electrode, which in this we only focus one area, either by anode or cathode, and the remaining four electrodes, which are encircling the center electrode, will actually uh, will distribute the current. For example, I'll explain with this example. If I'm stimulating one area with the anode in the middle, so now the current has to be gathered by the cathode in the surrounding electrode, because now I have, now the four electrodes are there to take away that current and to complete the circuit. So the part or the amount of current each electrode has to, take back is very minimal. So for example, if I'm giving 2 milliamps current in the anode, the cathode surrounding it will only have to gather zero point 0.1 or something 0.5 milliamps current, which is very insufficient for it to have an independent effect in the area beneath its domain. So only that area will get stimulated. The other, because the amount of current the other electrode has to bear or take out is very less. Now it is not upon a single electrode, so that is why other the chances of having other brain area to get stimulated or inhibited becomes very minimal with the HDTDCS. So thereby it increases the specificity and the focality and intensity of the current as well to the brain area. But because it is a more advanced technology, so the evidence for this is lesser available, I would say, as compared to the conventional TDCS. The evidence for this is still emerging. In the conditions, in the conditions when the patient is having compromised brain or having some actually pathology in the brain, for example, epilepsy, some gliosis, etc., then in those cases, HDTDCS would be the better answer, because it would be very precise. It would be very focal. It will not have effect on the other areas which we do not want to target. So this was only about the HDTDCS, because our workshop is basically concerned with the TDCS. So I'll be briefly discussing about the other four TDCS LEs. Uh, in a single machine of that TDCS, we have four options. To there in By one mode we can give TDCS. By altering some parameters, we can give TACS, that is transcranial alternating current stimulation, and third, transcranial pulse current stimulation, or transcranial random noise stimulation. All these four things have one thing in common, that they give weak they are dependent upon minute amount of current. They are weak intensity current producing thing, but the mechanism of action, how it influences the neuron, are a little different. Let's understand that in a brief way. So here is a figure. In the first figure, we are seeing the TDCS. So as I said, TDCS give direct current. The current, if I set the ramp up time, the current will reach to the maximum, then it will stay constant for the duration, for the entire duration for which I have applied the TDCS. And then after the duration gets over, it will come back to its stage. The anode will always depolarize, the cathode will always hyperpolarize. But in TACS, transcranial alternating current stimulation, what is happening? Okay, so what is happening? I'm talking about the fourth figure. The current is having sinusoidal wave. It is not constant. First thing. Second thing, the current will flow from anode to cathode, and it will reverse its direction. So one thing is that it is different from TDCS. It is giving a sinusoidal kind of current. Secondly, the current is reversing its direction. First, it is going from anode to cathode, then cathode to anode, like that. So the two electrodes will not have polarity specific. They will always changing their polarity while giving the session. Coming to the third picture, TPCS, transcranial pulse current stimulation, in which what we do, we just as today, as we give brief pulse CCT or brief theta bus RTMS, in the similar way, it gives pulses of current with on and off period. So it is said that neurons are, more sensitive to the changing electric field. This works in the concept behind developing this is this. Fourthly, we are seeing some chaotic kind of current sensation, right? So in this, what happened is TRNS, transcranial random noise stimulation. In this, the current will rapidly fluctuate with varying intensity, so which gives a noise kind of picture, which seems little chaotic, but it is good for the neurons. Let's understand this. See, our brain has a lot of billions of neurons. Each neuron is connected to another, to many neurons. So when we stimulate one neurons, it the chemical by the chemical transmission, many neurons subsequently we get stimulated or inhibit. In this process, the entire network of those neurons would produce certain brain waves, which we study like alpha wave, beta wave, gamma wave. Every wave has different kind of function, right? So just imagine when we were school kids, when the everyone and when I remember one thing from my school, when we were asked for the march past, everyone was moving in their own way for march past. But when the drum used to start beat, automatically our foots, the how we used to step the foot, it gets aligned automatically with the drum beat. So this tax works in the similar way. We give the this current which would produce certain wave which will actually align the brain wave activity which is already existing in the neuron. This thing is called entrainment. Basically, the external rhythmic activity will entrain the internal neuronal activity. Thereby, it will have its effect. Third thing, with the TPCS, as I already mentioned, the changing electric field, the neurons are more sensitive to the changing electric field. Imagine this thing if it is a dark room, and what I do, I just switch on the light, and after 2 minutes, then I will close. Then I will switch on again and again. If I'll do the same thing after two seconds, so your eyes will never get adapt. It will every time it will show contraction, dilation. In the similar way, if I give changing electric field in a predictable way, the neurons will have a more chance to remain active or to show better response in every stimulation, right? In the fourth picture, in the tRNS, what happens? It is, let me explain it with example. Imagine everyone has seen Lakshman Jhula, I guess, at least in pictures. Imagine we all are there in Lakshman Jhula. Some people might be just standing, some people might be walking in that, some people being. So, if what happens if anyone shakes that Jhula, what will happen? Everybody will be forced to move, even the person who is standing. So, compare it with the fact brain is that Lakshman Jhula, and the neurons which are just resting, some are active, are like those people. And when we shake that, when we give a current in a random way, every neuron will have to get active. So thereby it causes the changes in excitability. I'm not going into the details of that. Uh, this is the final part of my presentation regarding the recent developments. So, in the previous section, also people were very interested in knowing about the home-based device, ethical use, asking the questions regarding this. Let me tell you about it. So, FDA in December 2025 has approved the device Flow Neuroscience FL100 for at-home treatment of major depressive disorder, which is based upon the Empower Phase 2 study. So this study is a large-scale randomized controlled trial which happened in the US in the patients of major depression, which included patients of both moderate to severe severity. In this, what happened? The patients were given battery kind of thing, which was actually a TDCS device, which was operated through the mobile app and got connected with the Bluetooth app. So the doctor saw the patient and saw that, okay, the patient is fulfilling the criteria of major depression. So he prescribed certain dose and that device to the patient for at-home service. At home, what patient does, the patient will switch on that device, will connect to the mobile app, and in the mobile app, the already inbuilt protocol would be there, which patient doesn't have control over it. The doctor would decide the protocol for that patient. And it strictly has only certain number of sessions. Like in this study, patients were given 5 sessions a week. The CDCS session, that is for one day, only one session was allowed. That was for 30 minutes. So once the patient will switch on that session, and after it gets completed, then the device will get locked for the next 24 hours. So patient can't reuse it just within the duration of 24 hours. So this was the setting. Secondly, the number of sessions for 1 week was also pre-decided. If the patient tries to, give more sessions to themselves at home by giving 6, 7, so patient will not be able to do that. So the setting control was with the doctor. The headset of that TDCS device already had the preset electrode, which was focusing upon their left DLPFC. Patient just has to sit in their home whenever he's free or she's free. They can switch on the device and can stimulate themselves for next 30 minutes. The indication for which it is approved is it is major depression. The treatment protocol is it is given 5 days a week for first 2 weeks. Then it is given 2 to 3 times a week for next 3 weeks. Who controls the device? As I told, the doctor has the authority to decide upon the protocol, and it will be fixed. The patient will not be able to alter this. But the ethical concerns which people are interested and should know about it, that because something portable has been approved, so it opens a Pandora box of development of DIY TDCS in the market. Even in the Amazon, if you will see, you will get many companies TDCS. But the uh, thing which we have to be mindful about is they are not controlled device. The amount of electricity it produces, it is not controlled. We do not know who is handling it. We do not know what will happen to the data which we are feeding upon it. So there are privacy concerns, there are ethical concerns. And if somebody is using this device at home without the doctors deciding upon the protocol, it would have problems. Why? Because if anything, because we know that in the brain also everything works upon the limit. If our neurons has this thing, when we overstimulate something, the brain slides its threshold to the higher level. So there would be certain counterproductive networks which might get activated. So you do not know that after overstimulating yourself with a self-made protocol, how it is going to influence your brain, right? Because brain is complex. A lot of networks are there which we do not know, and what gets stimulated we do not know. And even every brain is different. And if the patient of depression who has bipolarity would make the protocol himself at home, can have many experts. Even just not having the history of bipolarity, patient can have switches, patient can have a lot of problems. Everyone's brain anatomy is different, and so it can have any kind of implication if you use it by yourself. And even if with the over, it is actually we can do anything to increase our working memory, but we do not know what implication it would have in the long term. That is the problem. So this is the main concern with it. The second recent development is the concept of priming. See, every patient doesn't respond with TDCS. So we always think, okay, what else we can do? How else we can make something better for the patient to show some response? So one thing is priming. The patient who do not show adequate response with the standard protocol, there is a recent thing called priming, which is based upon the principle of metaplasticity. So first, let's understand what is metaplasticity. Uh, to understand this, first let's understand the tipping point. This is very important. To prevent the brain from becoming overexcited, that is having seizures or completely comatose, brain itself has the ability to move the thresholds, right? If something is overstimulating our brain, the brain will increase the thresholds of the neurons. If something is constantly inhibiting, the threshold will automatically slide to the little lower side. So imagine one thing, if let's say for the hallucinations, we are trying to inhibit the temporoparietal area. So every time when I'm giving the inhibition protocol every day, the brain, because we are inhibiting, so the brain, the next neuronal activity depends upon the prior learned activity. So the threshold has already gone up, right, with the inhibition. So next time when I will give inhibition, it would become difficult for the next stimulation to show its effect. So what I can do is I can do priming. I can do little excitation for some time before actually uh, doing the inhibition. So what will happen? The threshold will get little balanced. So the next stimulation will have long lasting after effects. So this is the priming. But the general considerations and things to keep in mind regarding this is interstimulation interval. The priming, the time, like if I give uh, excitation for some time and suddenly starts inhibition, the priming will not happen. It has a very specific window. It will mostly the studies which have the studies which are there which have studied regarding priming says that the most important period of priming is between 3 minutes to 5 minutes. But we do not know what will happen if I prime the brain or if I keep the duration between the session more than that. What will happen below than that? So the timing of priming sessions is very important. The timing of intensity is very important because we do not know at what it is. In general, it is said that if I want to prime it for another stimulation, even the low intensity would work. But again, it is not as studied. It doesn't have much evidence, or we are even evolving in regarding this. And there is a lack of predictive biomarkers to assess the metaplasticity effect regarding the priming, and which can predict the patient's treatment response. So it is still in a development phase. There are many researches which are happening, which includes priming sessions as well. So this is a recent study which has published its protocol. In this study, for a patient who has hemiparetic upper limb, in this priming TDCS sessions have been planned, and even they have included task based activity during that session. So basically they are doing actually two things. They have involved the task based activity during the stimulation session, and before the stimulation they have included the priming session in order to facilitate the metaplasticity. So the results still have are not published. So this was about the overview of TDCS. My conclusion is TDCS is a non-invasive modality of treatment. It gives a tiny amount of direct current that only shifts the resting membrane potential. And when we apply it for a good amount of duration and for the repeated sessions, it leads to the neuroplasticity. Anode, in general, it is a stimulatory. Cathode, in general, it is inhibitory. It has good safety margin, easy to use, portable devices, preferred if patient prefers non-medicinal treatment, which is often the case, and for the augmentation with the medicines, even with the therapy for the early and the enhanced effects. Thank you. Now I'm ready for the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mubita, for an excellent elaborate introduction of PDCS, touching on most aspects involved in psychiatry as well as neurology. So we can have few questions. Anyone in the room who's interested, please identify himself and ask the question.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Vikashita, Assistant Professor at T.S. Mishra Medical College. Thank you, ma'am, for an insightful session. My query is that can we combine neuroimaging techniques with TDCS or other neuromodulation techniques to increase your precision and the consequent efficacy of treatment?
Okay. So among the audience, Madam.
Just, I hope the online participants they have heard the question. There was a query last time. So if they have not understood or heard the question is whether you can combine the neuroimaging techniques in order to increase the precision of TDCS. Talking about.
Yes. Thank you for the question, ma'am. This part is actually been studied, and there are many studies which have happened, which have combined the neuroimaging and the application of TDCS. For the sake of the presentation, I have not included that part, but the computational modeling, FNIRS, which tells the functional status of the brain after the application of the TDCS, what are the functional changes happening, the EEG markers, and the MRI changes before and after. There are many studies which actually shows the changes, and they are being done. There are many case studies being published. I would not be able to point out for every study, but there are ample of studies which have done that. And even for the research purposes, which we do in medical colleges, even you can do that, Vicky, like for the predictive biomarkers, and what actually is there any change before and after the application of session, or what changes can happen after 4 weeks, after 8 weeks, with the help of fMRI, etc., FNIRS. You can even, by these methods, actually you are substantiating your object or your subjective findings, because now I'm applying the rating scale, which is a subjective method, but by involving the imaging you are actually getting some objective change. So these studies are already being done and in the process as well. Yes.
Hello, Koitan. Myself, Dr. Shrikish Nair, consulting psychiatrist in mental hospital, Bareilly. My question is, will you please explain priming in simple words? ना जैसे तुमने दूसरी चीजें बताई जो कि प्राइमिंग हर पेशेंट में करनी है या फिर जिनमें रिस्पॉन्स नहीं आ रहा उन्हीं में करनी है तो इसको थोड़ा सा.
Okay. So among the audience, sir has asked me the question about the priming, whether when to do it and in what patient I should think about it, right? Okay. So priming TDCS will not be the first choice, right? Because what are the evidence base? Priming doesn't have that much evidence, first of all. The international guidelines currently do not recommend it. So firstly, you will try to apply those protocols only which has good evidence. Secondly, yes, priming we can apply. They are under the research, and the research which has involved priming shows the better effect in even in the patient who has not responded to the conventional protocols. So the cases in which the patient, you have applied good number of sessions, you have checked upon everything that no medication is interfering, the protocol was right, everything was good, but still the patient is not responding. For those patients, for now, I'm saying the priming can be tried before just becoming hopeless about the TDCS response. You can go for priming. Even the one thesis has been published from KGMU itself, in which I think for the patients of depression, for the elderly patients even, the priming session with the RTMS has been done before exciting the left GLPFC, and it shows better, results as compared to the sessions which didn't include priming, right? So when the research which we have, the results which we have till now, says that priming effect could be better than the simple conventional method, but I would suggest not to do it for a regular sessions. Go with the conventional and the protocol which have maximum evidence. But yes, for the research purpose and for the purpose, when you are not getting response in a conventional way, then go for priming. Okay, now we have a question in the chat. Do we plan our protocols after considering the concept of the tipping point, or we just ignore it completely? Also, like in RTMS, we have to find a new resting membrane threshold. Okay, so second question I would answer first. In RTMS, we find the resting membrane potential that is unique for each patient, but in TDCS, we do not have to do so. Second question is, do we plan our protocols after considering the concept of the tipping point, or we just ignore it completely? Okay. So as I told you that priming is a recent concept, right? It's a recent understanding. So we do not conventionally we haven't thought about the tipping potential, right? Tipping point or the sliding potential. But after, the advancement in the research happening, like when the patients were not responding, probably the reasons behind that or the molecular mechanism was studied, and it came into the picture that okay, this is also one thing, the sliding potential thing of the neurons. So anything which overexcites, or even if we are doing something like repeatedly, then maybe it is one of the reason that why we are not getting effect in this. So okay, let's have some change in that and let's inculcate this theory as well. So conventionally we haven't thought about it. We used to just stimulate, or just used to inhibit. But with the recent advancement in the understanding of the brain, and further elucidating the reasons why not everyone is responding, this theory came into the picture, and then we started thinking about this, and the priming came into the picture. Yeah.
Congratulations for this wonderful presentation. I just wanted to know that since HDTDCS, it targets a very narrow area, a focus area. So whether it will be useful to apply SDTDCS when we have neuronavigation like facilities, or if we are not very sure that what is the locality of the exact locus, then we can go for conventional TDCS, which would be better if we do not have this neuronavigation or such facilities.
Thank you, sir, for the question. So, my answer would be little mixed, because see, neuronavigation techniques would not be, available everywhere. It would not be feasible to do neuronavigation or computational modeling for every patient for now. For now, anything can happen in future. But so for that, because even in KGMC till now, we do not have neuronavigation. So for now, HTTDCS is the answer. But if we have, if in future neuronavigation becomes the common thing in clinical practice, and we are able to exactly, identify where is the problem or where is the metabolic activity has altered. So in that case also, HDTDCS would be the answer. Why? Because now we know what is the problem. Now we know what is to be targeted. So HDTDCS is always a better option, even when the neuronavigation techniques are available. Because now we know where is the fault. So now we want to, we would like to specifically modulate that area only. We would not like to have a diffuse effect. Okay, if the pathology is diffuse, or we want, one thing I can add upon it, because in HDTDCS there's a limitation. We can either inhibit, or we can either stimulate the area. Okay, we can either stimulate or inhibit the area. We can only focus one brain area at one time. But if we want to simultaneously focus two area. For example, if I see for example in depression we see hypoactivity in left DLPFC while hyperactivity in right DLPFC. Now I want to target both the things, right? And I see problems in the I see problems in both the areas through the neuronavigation. Then I would go for applying conventional TDCS. So my option for choosing TDCS or HDTDCS would depend upon the pathology, would depend how many brain areas I want to target upon. Thank you.
Good morning. Myself, Dr. Abhinav, Assistant Professor in Prasad Institute of Medical Science. Just want to hear your comment on safety profile in elderly because there are some morphological changes, especially scalp skin becomes fragile, there is atrophy, there is CSF flow, there are neurodegenerative changes. So how is this the effect of TDCS in elderly?
Can you be little? I did not understand the question. Can you?
I want to comment on safety profile in elderly population as you
Okay.
typically explained it in the pregnant
Okay.
population and
Okay.
child mental health.
So TDCS is safe in elderly as well. I haven't mentioned that slide. It's safety in the elderly population, but it is safe. Yes, but because the brain in the elderly population with advancing age, the brain itself will have little atrophy. So the current again will have to reach or has to cover more distance, and in that process more the chances of electric field getting more dissipated will become more, right? So, but it is safe. It can have a determining value in the efficacy because of the increasing distance between skull and actual gray matter, but it is safe.
So if there are no more questions, we'll finish after the last session. Please.
Thank you, ma'am. The presentation was very well explained. My question is first that you mentioned that facial metals we have to avoid in this patient. So, what kind of common facial metals do we include bases in that also? That is one question.
Anything apart from titanium material.
It's all over the face. We have to screen out the patient who wear braces or who are wearing some.
Yes. If the patient has some dental filling, right? Silver. You have to ask about it. If it is having some filling which is not ferromagnetic, then it is fine because then we even in our setting, such people come. Then we ask your dentist who had done your filling, what was the material? Then if we know that material good, if we do not know, I check whether it is ferromagnetic or non-ferromagnetic. Because that is the thing you should be mindful of. Yes.
So can I ask one last question? Okay. When you mentioned that if somebody is using the TDCS without supervision, so there may be a risk of switch or some other problems. So I just want no clinical experience all over these years that whether you have encountered any such patient who was using by himself and came to the for help with some problem.
Till now, in our setting, there is no provision of home-based TDCS. So,
any patient who used by himself and then came to you for problem.
No.
Any such experience?
No, till now we haven't encountered any patient who has applied TDCS at home by himself. Or if you are just want to know what is the rate in how many people we have seen switches in RTMS, yes, we have seen people having switched with it, but in TDCS till now we haven't seen a patient with depression having a switch after TDCS.
You can have the last question, please.
Just comparing with RTMS, can we access deeper areas of brain with TDCS as well? When we have a deep coil, that is.
If you are applying deep TMS, then it has, it can reach up to 5 to 7, some say, but at least up to 5 centimeter perfectly.
TDCS we don't have.
The effect will not go that much deeper. It is limited to the superficial areas.
And we are like in the process of, like you said, that it is not done always with neuronavigation, but if we have an option,
Yes.
so which modality would be best to combine with TDCS if we want to perform research or something?
Okay. You are talking about therapy or you are talking about medicine?
Which imaging would be best if we want to conduct research and we want to be specific about the areas that we are targeting? So
Okay.
which imaging, like we now have options of FNIRS and other things. So which has the best evidence that if we want to have a targeted intervention, which kind of imaging should we use?
Then FNIRS, I would say it would give the status at the present time only. In the real time, it would show you the functional changes in the activity of the brain. I would say FNIRS.
And just one last question. You mentioned about priming, and you
Yes.
also mentioned that you use RTMS for priming,
Yes.
and then you used PDCS. What if I just had a thought? We have a patient of schizophrenia with persistent auditory hallucinations, which we are giving ECT as such, which did not produce any effect. So would that ECT also serve as a priming?
Okay. Let me.
Maybe once.
Yes. It will not, because it will have diffused generalized effect on the brain, having, even it is producing action potential. It is totally altering the membrane potential. So
I think we can mostly talk with the comments that it is still evolving. And with the neuroinvestigation protocols, it's better to divide them into two based on the site that you want to choose, the area that you want to stimulate, and the pathology where it is located. And then based on whether you want a functional protocol or you want to utilize the anatomy per se, that is important. Because now we have navigation protocols, the central centers, and we can utilize them. So, yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohita Joshi, for an enlightening talk. We can close the talk and look forward to the next session.
thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am.